Hey everyone, it's Kong again, and here's another episode of Should You Summon. As always, in this video I'll be presenting high-level overviews using these 4 criteria to help you decide whether this banner is worth your hard-earned vouchers. How they fit into your team, whether they unlock any bonds, what kind of content they get used for, and their future availability. So let's hop right into this highly anticipated new character raid-up banner featuring Maiya and ARES from Langrisser Reincarnation Tensei. This banner runs from June 4th to June 17th, and just as a reminder, it's not a Destiny banner. This means it's possible to summon off-banner heroes even on your first SSR. You simply have an increased % chance to get Maiya or ARES. So first let's take a look at Maiya. Maiya's a mage with a mix of fairly standard single target and AoE spells. Her talent boosts her damage dealt and removes a buff from the enemy before attacking, and it also gives her extra int if she's close to enemies and removes a debuff from nearby allies. So this is a fairly well-rounded set of passive abilities in this talent. Her 3-cost skill is a big AoE blast centered on her position that has an interesting chain debuffing mechanic. At baseline, it removes 1 buff and replaces it with a debuff on every enemy in range. If there happens to be a demon unit within range, it causes this buff replacement effect to reiterate itself until every single buff on affected enemies has been replaced with a debuff. This 3C also has a friendly support side too, reducing cooldowns on all allies within range and dispelling a debuff. If one of these allies is holy type, then it removes all of their debuffs. She's a member of Empire's Honor, buffed by Bernhardt, Leon, and Lance, and the new faction, Langrisser Reincarnation, buffed by ARES. Now, for bonds, she unlocks the defensive bonds for bannermate ARES, and the defensive bonds for upcoming new character Rosalia. For her own bonds, she only needs Narm for her defensive bond, but she does need ARES for her attack bond. For content, in PvE she's on faction for Valkyrie in Eternal Temple and for Sleipnir in Ancient Beckoning. But if you can make her work in those fights, then power to you. I don't see her being exceptionally helpful in PvP either. She might have some potential cheese value alongside Farakia's upcoming 3-cost skill, the one that lets her convert enemy troop types to demon. If you're running a strict Empire team and need a versatile mage, then she could be a good pick for you. Finally, her 3C skill alone can be quite powerful in certain situations. If you happen to find yourself in one of those situations, then you can make it pay off. As far as availability, she should be coming back in early September on a raid-up banner with Yulia. So that means there's still no Destiny banners for Maiya on the schedule in the near future at least. Next, let's look at the star of the banner, ARES. ARES bursts onto the scene as an immediate top-tier PvP threat. His talent bumps all of his stats except HP up to plus 20% depending on how many enemies are nearby. It also allows him to move through enemies. He can build up stacks of crit rate based on how many enemies he moves through. Moving through enemies is a big enough mechanical shakeup on its own, but his ridiculous 3-cost skill is a big part of the reason he's so dangerous. I'll talk about it in a second when I get to the PvP content section, okay? He's a member of Protagonists, buffed by Matthew, Empire's Honor, buffed by Bernhardt, Leon, and Lance, and obviously his own faction, Langrisser Reincarnation, buffed by ARES. So yes, he does come with his own fusion power, which increases damage dealt when enemies are nearby. Unfortunately, he never wants to carry it. At least in PvP, his skill slots are all accounted for. This is going to hold the new faction back until they add a second buffer. In the meantime, most members of the faction are going to have to be run as part of their other factions, or buffed in some other way. For bonds, ARES unlocks the attack bonds for his bannermate Maiya, and for the upcoming new character Rosalia. If you remember from Maiya's bonds, this means Rosalia needs both of these units for her bonds. So if you plan on summoning and using her, that's something to bear in mind for this banner. He also unlocks the defensive bonds for the upcoming new character Licorice, his little sister. For his own bonds, ARES needs Maiya for his defensive bond, and Bozel for his attack bond. For content, he's on faction for Phoenix and Valkyrie in the Eternal Temple, and Sleipnir and Hugin and Munin in Ancient Beckoning. I can actually see him being fairly helpful for Phoenix because of his mobility and his sheer power. But where he really shines is in PvP. So let's talk about that 3-cost skill that I mentioned earlier. After he pops it, he can move again with his remaining movement +4 in straight lines only. This gives him a bit more room to set up and maneuver than Parn's similar charge attack. You also gain 20% attack and the common effect for flyers Reinforcements, which heals 20% after taking action. Then, after dealing damage, he teleports any enemies within 2 rings to be beside him like a tiny Sleipnir, and then hits them with an AoE blast. If you moved through at least 1 enemy on the way in, and picked up a talent stack, you can then move an additional 4 spaces to get away. So say you have the new weapon Scarlet Reaper. You can charge in with your extra movement, flying through whoever you want, then drop a Wind Whisper AoE blast to prime the enemies with some damage and debuffs, and teleport them all around you. Then your 3C's AoE kicks in, and then the Scarlet Reaper kicks in for an additional burst of damage. Then you can move away and heal up with reinforcements if needed. He does also have a powerful single target attack, so if you want to build him more focused on single target damage, you can try to hurt Jugler that way. For availability, ARES should be coming back in October on a Destiny banner with Emilia and Betty. So, just to wrap up, we have Maiya, who's a versatile maid mage who cleans up buffs and debuffs. She unlocks defensive bonds for ARES and Rosalia. And then we have ARES, who's a dominant PvP unit with a game-changing ability to ignore enemy obstruction. He unlocks the attack bonds for Maiya and Rosalia, and the defensive bond for Licorice, and he's also the sole faction buffer for the new Langrisser Reincarnation faction. If you play PvP, or if you're interested in getting into PvP this season, then I highly recommend summoning on this banner for at least 1 copy of ARES. Ideally, you'd want to get Maiya as well to unlock his bonds, and if you're already competitive, you'll want to get multiple copies of ARES so you can have him at 6 stars in time for the Season 4 playoffs. Now, just a note about upcoming banners. Next week should be a Raid Up banner featuring Betty and Shelfaniel, and the 2 weeks after that appear to be more catch-up Destiny banners, one featuring Illustrial, Young Jessica, and Dehart, and the second featuring Ledden, Rachel, and Altamuller. So if you need one of those characters for bonds, or if you have a guaranteed Destiny pick on one of them, you know they're out there. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you had any luck, or if you're making the controversial decision to skip this one. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next Should You Summon.